So we're going to simplify radicals, and we've done this before. But we're going to do kind of use the product property concept here, and I'm going to separate my numbers and letters. If I separate the radical 32, and then I'm going to separate the radical x8, and I'm going to do each part. This part we can do in our calculator. If you press that in your calculator, you will get 4 radical 2. So then what we need to do is do this part, and all you have to do in this part is you're going to divide the 8 by 2 because there's a square out here. So 8 divided by 2 gives me x to the 4th power. If there's anything left over, it would stay in the radical. So anything that's on the outside of the radical gets put together. So 4 to the x 4th power, and then whatever doesn't stays in the radical is radical 2. And so there's our simplifying that radical. So let's look at our next radical. Now we have x to the 4th power. So I'm going to separate to the 4th power, or 4th root, 16. And I'm going to do the same thing with all the letters. And you can do them all together if you wanted to, but I'm going to do them separately just so you can see. So if I do my numbers, this will be 2 in your calculator. We divide 24 by 4, so we're going to get a to the 6th power. And if we divide 13 by 4, we're going to get 3b to the third power, but we're going to have 1 left over, so that b stays inside. Because 4 goes into that 3 times, but there's 1 left over, and that's what stays in the radical. So anything outside the radical stays outside the radical, anything inside stays in the radical, and that's how we simplify. So we're going to do quotients or division. And to do division, we're going to separate them just like we did multiplication. So I'm going to take the square root of x to the 6th on the top. I'm going to do the square root of y to the 7th on the bottom. Keep in mind, remember, that's a 2 that's not written. And so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the radical on this one, which will be, what would that be? Divide, we get x to the 3rd power. And the bottom, though, we're going to have a remainder, but we're still going to get y to the 3rd power, but we're going to end up with 1 under. The rule for simplifying is you cannot have a radical in the denominator. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that. So in this case, it's a square root, so I only need 1 more y. So if I multiply by the 1 more y, that gives me 2. And if I do the same with the numerator, this is really 1, so I'm not changing the value. But when I multiply this times this, I'm going to end up with just a y. So my numerator stays exactly the same, but my denominator becomes, this becomes y, and so y times y cubed is y to the 4th power. And so I've simplified and rationalized my denominator. Now it gets a little bit more complicated if we look at our next problem over here. I'm going to separate, so I'm going to separate, but this time it's the 4th root 6, and I'm going to separate the 4th root 5 and the 4th root of x. So let's deal with the x first by getting, none of these simplify because none of these come out. But if I take and multiply my denominator by just the square root of x, the 4th root of x, that's only 2 of them. So what I have to actually multiply by is 3 of them, because 3 and 1 gives me 4. And so by doing that, I end up with 4 x's. And 4 x's to the 4th root is x. So this ends up as an x, and this ends up as an, well, this doesn't, that part doesn't end up as an x, my fault. This part doesn't end up as an x. But the bottom ends up as an x because we have 4 of them. So if I multiply this, I'm going to end up with the 4th root of 6x cubed. So that takes care of this part. But down here, this part becomes just x. So now I have x on the denominator, but I still have the 4th root of 5. So now I have the numerator still what it is, but the denominator I have to get rid of the 4th root of 5. So I'm going to multiply by the 4th root of 5, and I need 3 more of them to get rid of the radical signs. So I have to do the same thing in the numerator. So this part right here becomes 5, and so 5x is my denominator, which we've gotten rid of the radical now. And if I do the top part, I multiply 5 cubed times 6, so 5 cubed times 6, 5 cubed, let me do that real quick, 5 cubed times 6 is 750. So the fourth root of 750, and we still have our x cubed in there. And then we have our 5x on the bottom because it's simplified with no radical in the denominator.